So they're kind of facing.
So these are representatives from my 8th grade social studies classes. The students were either appointed by me because of their academic merits in social studies or elected by their peers. So we have about half of them here.
Terrific.
And I know several students here have questions for you this morning. So I don't know if you want to just dive into questions or if you want to say something first.
Why don't I talk just a little first and then we'll go on to questions. How's that? So it's delightful to be with you today. I am a teacher, and I don't get to be around students very often, so this is a fun treat for me. I actually started out teaching first grade, and then I taught special ed, and then I spent the last 20 years of my career with the Spokane Public Schools supervising school principals. So I had 16 school principals, and I was their boss. I had 12 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 high schools. And then I retired after 30 years of being an educator. And for my retirement job, I moved from Spokane to Olympia, where I was Governor Gregoire's director of policy. So that gave me a chance to be in charge of all state policy. And I had 26 people who worked for me who were policy advisors on everything from the environment to energy to K-12 education to higher education to early learning and human services. So everything was kind of under my umbrella as a policy director. And I did that for 4 years. And then I actually retired after that because I'd also at the same time had a blood disease, a blood cancer that's fatal. And I just finished a second stem cell transplant. And I wanted to go play for a little while. So my husband and I went and played. And about 2 years ago, when this opportunity came up that this seat was going to be open to represent the citizens in the 22nd legislative district, I thought, you know, I'm healthy and well, I still want to do that work. And so I ran for office and got elected last November. So that's what brings me here. So really, I'm a teacher. That's what I am more than anything, who is now doing legislative work.
Wow, thank you for letting us know about you, Representative Dolan. So I know some folks had some questions here this morning. Who would like to go first with a question for Representative Dolan? Don't be shy. All right, Trayvon has a question for you.
What is your theory decision?
Can you hear him?
I'm having a hard time hearing the question.
Trayvon, can you come over here near the microphone and the camera?
What are your views about the McCleary decision?
About McCleary? What about McCleary? What are we doing about it?
Your views on the McCleary decision.
So there have been several different lawsuits since like the 1970s till now in terms of public education. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the Washington State Constitution is unique. It is different than every other state constitution because it says it is the paramount duty of the state of Washington to fully fund education. And so that puts us in a different arena than any of the other 49 states. So, I mean, it's very clear. It's our paramount duty to do K-12 education. And it's been there since 1889. And so we have never actually done that because what we've done instead is the states put in a lot of money for K-12 education. But as you know, your parents vote on school levies and their taxes locally pay for a chunk of public education. So with the McCleary decision, the Supreme Court basically said, you know, the state needs to be paying for all of basic education. We can still have school levies for things like after school sports, you know, the kinds of special things that parents want their kids to have. But the basic education, your teacher's salary, your classroom that you're sitting in, your books, all of that needs to be paid by the state. And so one of the main reasons I actually ran for public office to be elected last November was because of trying to solve that problem. The only way the state can actually pay for K-12 education is to get more revenue into the state budget. And so I'm working on this kind of in two ways. One, I'm on the finance committee, which is looking for ways to bring more sustainable revenue and an ongoing revenue stream into the state budget so we'll have money to pay for education, and then also then to fully fund education. So it's probably the cornerstone of the work I'm doing right now is the McCleary decision and trying to get more money into the state budget and to the state coffers so we can actually pay for education. And we can't just pay for education, because if you come to school and you don't have food in your tummy, you don't have clothes on your back, you can't go see a doctor when you're sick, you don't have a house to live in, it's pretty hard to learn in school. You need all those other supports around you in order to learn in school. And so we can't ignore all the other human services that a state needs to help its citizens with.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Trayvon? Yes. He says yes. So for Representative Bill.
So I'm having a really hard time hearing.
Savannah, did you want to ask your question? So the microphone is over here. So if you could just stand right here and speak loudly.
What led you to a career path as a representative?
What
led you to a career
Oh,
path?
okay. So kind of everything I did ahead of time led me to this choice. You know, being 30 years working in education, working with students like yourselves, that was kind of the driving workforce of my life. Is I'm pretty dedicated to kids and making sure our kids get the best education possible. I also worked a lot with children in deep, deep poverty. So the kids that I taught came from homes where they didn't have food and they didn't have health care and they didn't have clothing. And oftentimes their families would move out of their house in the middle of the night because they couldn't pay their heating bill. So they were very mobile kids. They would change often and not be in my classroom very long because their families were just there for a short time. So I really understood early on what deep poverty looks like and how hard it makes it for children to learn in school if they're living without any of those other support services. And so I did that for 30 years. And then when I came and worked for Governor Gregoire for 4 years, I learned about all the other aspects of state government. And probably the thing I like to do more than anything is work with teams of people to find the answers to really complex problems. And so this job is perfect if you like to do that kind of thing. If you enjoy people and if you're inquisitive and you want to learn a lot about a lot of different things, this is like the perfect job. But it really is all about building relationships with other people. That is the biggest part of this work. Because if you don't have good relationships in place, you really can't get very far in the legislative arena. You really have to earn people's trust. When you say something, they need to know they can believe you. You're going to stick to your word and you're going to work with them. And if you can build all those relationships and you're inquisitive, it's a great job. And so for me right now, at this point in my life, this is a great job because I'm using all my skill set. And that's really invigorating.
All right. Thank you very much. Next question. Other questions that we have? Alicia's got a question. So Alicia, could you come stand over here and loudly state your question?
Oh, okay. How do you propose to structure school funding so it's equitable to all students in all school districts?
So that gets back to the fact that I'm on the finance committee. And what you need to begin with is you need enough money to pay for public education. So getting new money into the state is critical. Right now, and I don't know if you've studied this in your class with your teacher or not, but right now, Washington State has a really regressive tax system. In fact, one of the most regressive tax systems in the United States. What that means is people who are poor or middle class pay more in taxes than the people who are wealthy in Washington State. So the richest people, the richest companies often get off without paying their fair share of taxes, while the poorer people pay more. And the reason it's that way is our main form of revenue is a sales tax and a business and occupation tax. So we tax, when you guys go in and buy clothing, you know there's a sales tax added on to everything you buy, right? So if you go in and you buy a new shirt, you pay a certain amount of sales tax. If Bill Gates, who as you know is a very rich man, if he goes in and buys the same shirt, he pays the same sales tax as you do. There's no difference. They don't say, oh, you're so rich, you need to pay more sales tax. So a sales tax is what's called a flat tax. It's the same for everybody, no matter what your income is. So we're trying to put taxes in that would actually tax richer people more, because they pay very little in taxes compared to the rest of us. And that's what makes it so upside down in Washington state. So one of the things that the Finance Committee is looking at is what's called a capital gains tax. And that would be a tax on interest income. So it wouldn't be on your income. It's not like when your parents bring home their paycheck, they pay a certain amount to the federal government for their taxes, for their federal taxes. It's not like that. That would not be taxed. But what would be taxed is if I'm really wealthy and I have a lot of investments, and I decide to sell a chunk of my investments on the stock market, and I make $25,000 in interest on that sale, I would pay a tax to the state of Washington on that interest. It's like 7%, I think, that I would then pay to the state of Washington as a capital gains. So that's one way that we're hoping to have a new tax in place that would actually tax some of the wealthier people in Washington who right now really aren't paying their fair share of taxes.
All right, thank you. What other questions do we have? All right, we've got Natalie with another question.
What's your opinion on Trump's removal of Muslims and immigrants, and how would it affect our community?
Could you hear Natalie's question?
I think David did.
Could you repeat that question?
One more time and speak towards this right here.
I'm sorry, you guys. It's just hard to hear from this earpiece. It gets kind of muddled.
What's your opinion on Trump's removal of Muslims and immigrants, and how would it affect our community?
What's my opinion on?
So Natalie's asking about Trump's removal of Muslims and immigrants and how it affects our community.
Okay, so immigration.
Yes.
Okay, so I believe the United States is a nation of immigrants. So my family came to the United States in 1950. And at the time they came from Scotland. They had been fighting a guy named Cromwell in England. The Scottish Highlanders lost to him. He marched 3,000 Scottish Highlanders down to London, put them on a boat, and sent them to the New World, to the colonies. And so they came here not wanting to come here, but they came here because they were forced to come here. And 2 generations later, my family was there the morning of the Revolutionary War when it got started in Lexington and Concord. And so they've been here since the beginning, but they're still immigrants. The only people in the United States who are not immigrants are our Native American citizens. All the rest of us are immigrants. We're a nation built on immigration. We're a nation that's rich because we have so many diverse people in our nation. So immigration is critical to us. In Washington state, we have a lot of big technology companies. We have Microsoft, we have Boeing, Amazon. I mean, all of them are looking for engineers. And to get enough engineers, they have to go to other countries and import engineers. I mean, they hire people who are taught here in Washington schools, but that's not enough to satisfy their need for highly educated people. So it's really critical for Washington state companies to be able to bring immigrants in. Our farmers are dependent on workers coming up from Mexico every year to pick cherries, to pick apples, to pick crops. There aren't enough people in Washington to do those jobs, so they need to import farm workers to help them with their crops every year. So every place you look in Washington, we're dependent on immigration. And the problem with what you see happening now, where the president signed the executive order to stop immigration, is it not only hurts us as a nation and our diversity, but it really hurts Washington state companies, which is why you saw our attorney general and our governor take such a strong stand and take it to court to say, you can't do this to us. We are dependent on immigration. So what we need is we need an easier path for people to become citizens, because there are a lot of great people who want to come here and be Americans and be productive members of our society. At the same time, you know, it's really important that we keep dangerous people out. So there needs to be a screening process to do that. And my own daughter is she works for the Foreign Service, and she's the vice consulate in Kuala Lumpur, and she speaks Arabic, and it's her job to screen people who want to come to the US who are Arabic speaking Muslim citizens of other countries who want to be able to come here. So she's been highly trained in how to screen each of those people to make sure that the people who we think would be really good citizens and be here for all the right reasons get a chance to get here, and the people who are more dangerous that we don't want here at all don't get a chance to get here. So the trick is having the right people with the right training, making sure that there's a careful screening process.
Thank you, Representative Dolan. Emma now has a question that she'd like to ask. She's walking closer to the microphone.
Where do you stand on the issue regarding transgender bathroom rights?
Transgender bathrooms. So, you know, having been using public bathrooms my whole life, it's actually never occurred to me to pay too much attention to who else is in there or to ask to see their private parts. You know, to me, it's kind of a non-issue. The dangerous people are not transgender people. The dangerous people are pedophiles of children. And no matter what bathroom they go in, they're going to be dangerous. We need to have laws that pick up those kinds of people. Most people, when they go in the bathroom, just need to go to the bathroom. So the transgender bathroom thing, to me, makes no sense at all.
All right, we have a couple other folks wanting to ask questions, so I'm going to have Ian go up. And then maybe we'll do a stack. We'll do Nick, and then Dylan and Blake if we have time.
What do you plan to accomplish as a representative?
Okay, so the main thing I hope to accomplish this year is to get more sustainable state funding, and kind of we talked about some of those ideas already. The other thing I hope to accomplish is to get a couple of really important bills passed in K-12 education, and I'll talk about those for just a minute. You're going to be running into these bills when you get to high school. So right now, the state of Washington, in order for you to graduate from high school, you have to pass a standardized test. And that was put into place back when George W. Bush was president. And at that point in time, they wrote federal legislation called No Child Left Behind. And we jokingly call it No Child Left Untested, because what it did is it put in all sorts of what they call accountability measures, which are really all sorts of tests. And the truth is, I'm a teacher. You have a great teacher there in your classroom with you. I believe teachers know when their students have learned what you need to learn to go on to the next grade. I trust teachers' judgment. I don't need to pay an outside testing company a whole lot of money to come in and give you guys a standardized test. As Egrin says, you've learned it. I believe her, because she's a highly trained teacher. She knows if you've learned the content you need to know. So to make kids, right now you're probably seeing some news, some news things about kids, seniors not being able to graduate because they didn't pass this test, even though they might have a 4-point grade point average and have all their credits. If they didn't pass the test, they can't graduate. So we're trying to change the law that takes that mandatory test out of the system. We think it is a waste of money. We trust our teachers' judgment. So I'm hoping we will get that passed. That's very important to me. My own husband was a middle school science teacher, really good school science teacher. And he had this really creative curriculum that got his students very excited about science and maybe going into a science career. And when all this testing came into place, he had to change what he taught the kids to just getting them ready to take tests. And he hated it so much, he actually left the classroom and then became a mentor teacher where he worked with other teachers. So even in my own husband, I've watched him get out of the classroom because there was just too much testing. So that's one of the things that's really important to me. The other thing that's really important to me is right now the state of Washington, kind of in the same era, had made this decision to make it 24 credits to pass to graduate from high school. instead of what it's been, which is 21 credits. We also think that goes way too far, because what it does is it makes it so you have to take 24 pretty specific credits, and it takes away your individual choice. So if you're excited about a music program or an art program, or you want to go to a skill center and learn a trade, that precludes you from being able to do that. And so we think 24 credits takes away your own individual choices in education so you can stay excited about school. And we think 21 credits would give you more individual choice within that. And the people against this say that 24 credits has more accountability. We say 24 credits really kills excitement about education, which as a teacher, that's the last thing I want to do for you, is I want you to be excited about school. I want you to be excited about exploring what you want to be when you graduate and go on to college or go on to a trade. So I want to get you to be a productive, happy citizen as quickly as possible, because the state of Washington needs to do that for us.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Nick. You had a question? The microphone's right there.
Do you think financing or family consumer science would be appropriate as a core class?
Sorry, didn't get it again. You guys are speaking really clearly. It's just hard to hear through these earphones.
So he's asking, do you think financing or family consumer science would be appropriate as a core class?
No, I absolutely think it would be appropriate. And it's actually in the high school curriculum, but I'm not sure it's as effective as it needs to be. The dilemma with teaching financing is until you're in the boat where you actually need to know it, it doesn't seem like it's very worthwhile to you. So I have a daughter who's 37. She's the one I talked about who's in the Foreign Service. And I have a son who's 34. And he and his wife just bought their first house 2 years ago. When they were buying that house, they were suddenly totally invested in learning about mortgages and how you finance a house. They were scraping together every penny they had in order to put a down payment on the house. They were looking at mortgage rates and all of that. So it was really important for them at that moment in time to learn about mortgages. If he had been taught that when he was 16 or 17, I don't think it would have made as much of an impression. There's this old saying that when you're ready to learn, the teachers will appear. But I do think that it's really important to teach students in middle school and high school, something about budgets and financing, because a lot of families get themselves in trouble by spending more money than they should in places they shouldn't spend it.
All right, I think Dylan was up next with a question. The microphone's right there on my desk.
What are some reasons as to why the main budget is incomplete?
So the reason the budget's incomplete is you have some ideological differences between the people who need to reach agreement. You have what I described to you, where we have this finance committee that has come up with all sorts of ideas on how to raise new state revenue with new taxes. So that's the House Democrats' idea, but it's passed the whole House, but mainly with Democratic support. In the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, they have a different idea for how to do that, which is based on shifting property taxes. So if your parents own their own house, or even if they rent, it's in their rent, they're paying property taxes for that house every year. And right now, that's dependent on basically the cost of houses in that area. So if you're in a rural little town with houses that aren't very expensive, you pay less property taxes than if you're in like a Seattle. And what the Republican plan does is it really makes the property taxes in places like Seattle go up really steeply, and it saves people property taxes in the small rural towns where they basically make less money. And the problem with that is there's a lot of people that live in Seattle that really aren't wealthy people. There's a lot of older people that bought their homes 40 years ago when they could afford them. And now the value of that house has gone up exponentially because housing prices in Seattle are climbing so fast they won't be able to afford to stay in their house if they have to pay that much more property tax. So we don't think that the Senate idea works, and it doesn't actually generate enough money to fully fund education. So right now what's happening is we keep trying to get them to sit down with us and talk about how do we come to agreement on some plan here, which we have to do by the end of June, or state government start shutting down. But they so far won't come and sit down and talk with us. So if you can't talk to somebody, you can't reach agreement. So all we're about right now is trying to get them to come and talk to us.
All right, thanks. Next up, we have Blake.
Why should rich people pay more in taxes? Didn't they work hard to get where they are? Why should they have to pay more for their hard work?
So why should people pay more in taxes? The
No,
reason,
why should rich people pay more in taxes for their hard work?
why should rich people pay more in taxes? Because right now they're not even paying what your parents are paying in taxes. They're paying less than all the rest of us.
Yeah, but didn't they work hard for their money?
Didn't your parents work hard for their money?
No, didn't the people who are rich work hard for their money?
They
Why
did. They did. As I'm sure your parents work hard for their money, I work hard for my money. But right now, the rich people aren't paying their fair share. All the rest of us are paying more taxes than they are. So we're not asking them, we're asking them to pay their fair share of taxes. As a percentage of their income, they're paying just a minuscule amount in taxes. As a percentage of your parents' income, your parents are paying a lot more in taxes. So they need to pay more in taxes, and the way the tax laws in Washington state are, they have no way to do that. So Bill Gates Sr., who is not the Bill Gates that you know, it's his dad, he actually ran a capital gains tax, put it on the ballot in Washington state back in about 2006, I think. And because he kept saying, you know, I made all my money here in Washington state. Washington state's a great place for me to live. I made a good income. I have no way to give enough of that to the state. And so he wanted a capital gains tax so he could actually pay more of his fair share in taxes. And at that point in time, it did not pass because I think it was, it wasn't well advertised. People didn't understand it. And people in the middle class, people in poverty thought, you know, it's just going to come to me soon. So it's not going to just stay with wealthy people. It's going to come down to me too. So right now, the reason that they need to pay more is right now they're paying less than all the rest of us in terms of a percentage of their income.
All right, thank you, Representative Dolan, and thanks everyone for your questions. We have just a minute or two left of our time here. So Representative Dolan, I'm wondering, is there anything, since we have another video chat planned for the 16th, is there anything that you want us to do or come up with for that next video chat?
So you know what would be great, and on the 16th, we're gonna have to play with that date a little because I might have to be voting that day, but we'll figure that out with Dave. But one of the things, and Dave might have already done this, Ms. Egren, is if they haven't played at ledge.wad.gov, have they had a chance to do that website and see how you look up bills and learn about bills?
We haven't yet, but we can certainly do that before then.
That's a great site, and you can look up bills by content. I know one of the questions you guys asked is, what have I done for dogs? So my assignment would be go on that website and put in the search dogs, and just see and put every year and see what comes up for the laws that have been passed for dogs. And the other thing is, you're doing that, know that like every year there might be 2,000 bills that get introduced, and only about 600 might actually get through to become law. And so you can also see there's a lot of good ideas that for one reason or another never actually become law. But it's a fun site, and the more they can play with that, they will be masters of their own destiny in terms of understanding Washington state and laws.
All right, so we will do that before then, and maybe we'll get back to you about some of the laws that we're interested in and specific bills that we have questions about.
Great. Be perfect.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today.
This was very fun. Your good thinking and your good questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.